So, years have gone by, but you still somehow managed to escape the ever-changing world of Azeroth? Maybe you've just had a long break and after facing all the mixed opinions floating in the air about BFA, you decided to check it out yourself. It's also possible that you're just looking to scratch that addiction itch which is missing the game because, as a wise man once said, you never quit the World of Warcraft, you just take breaks from it. This new and returning players compendium will focus on the systems in the endgame experience in the current and at the same time last patch of the expansion, also known as 8.3 Visions of Azeroth. You'll get a coverage of the most important bits that came alongside the patch and expansion as a whole, with some additional information about the BFA gearing experience which will stay relevant until the inevitable release of Shadowlands later this year. At long last. Now for a no bullshit disclaimer. Keep in mind that patch 8.3 is very grindy and will take you many weeks to catch up to those that have been playing for the past few months, as the process is quite lengthy. Unless you invest an unholy amount of efficient game time in a period of 2 to 3 weeks,
50 days. Got it right at 50 days.
Which would technically make it possible, thanks to the newly added Corruption Bender and Echoes of Ny'alotha currency. More on that later. All of that makes your character progression for once not as time-gated as you were in the past. And the difference in player power between those that are geared up and those that are not is humongous, particularly in PvP. This can result in frustrating experiences until you're caught up to a minimum degree compared to others. Having said that, do not get discouraged if you want to play the game, as there is plenty of content out there for you to discover. Let's start with Azerite Armor. Following the removal of artifact weapons and their abilities for most classes, BFA suffered from an even bigger pruning than Legion, especially if you add on top the removal of legendaries and tier sets. Big shoes were left to fill. Blizzard tried doing so by adding the dreaded by most Azerite Armor pieces, which were supposed to be a replacement to the so-called removed borrowed power, which is mostly everything that revolves around gearing in an expansion. While the concept was good, the execution was for the most part pretty poorly done, which led to a lot of problems and eventually, forced by community dissatisfaction, the removal of the Azerite system going forward into Shadowlands. Azerite Armor pieces cover 3 specific slots of your character's gear, notably the helm, shoulders and chest. Any piece you acquire will for the most part have 4 traits to choose from, plus an item level increase as the 5th one. That upgrade gets unlocked once you get a high enough Heart of Azeroth level, more on that later. Those traits always consist of 2 so-called class and spec specific options. The third one is usually a passive stat proc, passive damage or healing effect, and the fourth one is a niche and defensive one. Once you have picked those traits, you can always go to an NPC located near the transmog and bonus roll vendor that will allow you to reset your choice of traits on that specific item, but for an increasing amount of gold every time you choose to do so. That cost lowers over time, after each day to be precise, but still, it's best to avoid resetting them too often. Balance around those traits is for most classes and specs questionable to say the least, so it's best to just try and get the best ones for your class. There are great sources out there according to the type of content you prefer to engage in, which I'll cover more in depth in another video. I recommend using Walk of Logs for raids, Raider.io for Mythic Plus, and finally the lootdistrict.com for all things PvP. The Heart of Azeroth is this expansion's artifact weapon, only this time it's a neck piece and isn't exactly interesting on its own. It follows the same idea of progression as artifact power did in Legion, but without any real payoff. You increase your Heart of Azeroth neck level by gaining artifact power, which is something you get these days from doing almost any kind of content, whether it's dailies, assaults, mythic plus or war quests. A valuable source of Azerite power, also known as AP, are island expeditions and notably the weekly island expedition cap, which is annoying to do for most and not exactly engaging, so it's in line with most BFA features. It's worth noting that AP gains have been buffed by so much that you don't need to bother farming it anymore, as you'll just passively gain levels extremely fast from doing content that you would normally do anyway. Essences are a talent-like system that have been added directly into the Heart of Azeroth gear slot, which means they'll all get stronger the higher your neck level is. The whole system is made with 4 choices in mind, 1 major, which is usually an active ability, and 3 minor, which are just passive stat, damage or healing procs. They also come in 4 available ranks, knowing that the rank 4 is purely a cosmetic increase while ranks 1 to 3 give increased player power. You can swap them out just like talents, which means you need to be either in a rested area or to use a Tome of Tranquil Mind crafted by Inscription Profession, which you can easily buy on the auction house. Acquiring them, however, is another lengthy progression system. Each different essence is unlocked by doing another specific and predefined type of content, which is something the community has had a divided opinion since its release. An example of sources you can get one from are dailies, reputations, world PvP achievements, mythic plus, arenas, battlegrounds. The list is lengthy and you can see where to get each one from the Heart of Azeroth Essences tooltip, knowing that getting the rank 1 is usually very easy, while the 3rd and 4th are considered hard or time consuming, as some of them are often quite time gated. Praise the light! Titanforging has officially been cancelled. Well, not exactly, as you are now introduced to the corruption system instead, which is different, but the same. Players rejoiced with the removal of the Titanforge system so much they forgot about what's coming in its stead, which, quite frankly, led to an abnormal amount of disasters of all kinds. You can check out what I mean by watching this video made by my friend Frank, link is in the description below. Although random item level increases are no more, you now have a chance at getting a random corrupted effect on your piece of loot. It's worth noting that it's possible to cleanse the item from that corruption if you choose to do so, but remember that this action cannot be undone. Every item has a chance to become corrupted with the exception of Azerite Armor and trinkets. There is a total of 19 corruption rolls with the possibility of having ranks from 1 to 3, making it a grand total of 52 combinations. While higher ranks of corruption make for a stronger effect, the amount of corruption it gives is linear, which doesn't necessarily mean it's better, as it becomes stronger but for a higher cost. Hitting the lottery with your drop is now more accurate than RNG Titanforging ever was, as the impact per piece of gear is much bigger in comparison, especially if you account that some of them are much stronger than others depending on what class and spec you play.
That's quite big.
You can thankfully combat that lack of luck because, let's face it, you'll never drop the thing you want anyway by buying the corruption you want from the corruption vendor and apply it on a piece of gear of your choice with a currency called Echoes of Nyalotha. Since there wasn't enough RNG in that system already, the corruption vendor doesn't sell every available corruption at all times, but instead just a select few of them. The ones that are being offered change every 3.5 days based on a set rotation, so you better mark your calendars for the ones that you're after. As a tip, you can check out the front page of Wowhead for the currently available corruptions without having to walk up to the vendor every time. But wait. There's more. With great power comes great responsibility. It's how I would summarize this system as a whole. What it means is that your character gains additional power through those items and effects, but at the price of having a higher amount of corruption, basically just like politics. Each item has a set amount of corruption attached to it. The higher your corruption level is, the more deadly those negative effects become, eventually killing you if you wear too much corruption. There are 5 corruption thresholds. Once you've attained the next one, they don't get overridden, but get added on top of the ones you already had, so you're in for a treat. From 1 to 20, you occasionally get slowed in combat. A higher corruption amount means a stronger slow effect, eventually making you feel like a Retribution Paladin. From 20 to 39, you may spawn Eye of Corruptions, which are zones that deal ticking damage to you if you stand inside them. Each time you get hit, you get a debuff that increases the damage you take from the next hits, so it's in your best interest to move out of those zones. A higher corruption amount means a bigger eye, area and damage. From 40 to 59, you are starting to get chased by so-called things from beyond. If they catch you, they will damage you for a considerable amount. You can, however, slow them or use all forms of CC at your disposal as they despawn after just 7 seconds, thus making it possible for you to not get hit by them. It's worth mentioning that those Beyonders only spawn if you have received damage, so you finally have a reason to not stand in fire. A higher corruption amount makes for faster Beyonders when they spawn, making it harder for you to escape them. Now this is where the fun begins. From 60 to 79, if you now get hit by one of your things from beyond, you instantly proc the other corruptions, which means you are now very slowed in a pretty big deadly Eye of Corruption. From 80 points and higher, you now take increased damage while at the same time reducing healing you receive from all sources, making your healers hate you and, trust me, they see it very clearly when you're taking damage from nowhere. While you may try to survive for an entire encounter with this high of a corruption amount, the average time it will usually last is about 30 seconds, something I may or may not know much about. The ideal amount of corruption you want to aim for, outside of 0, is up to 39 for PvP and high-end PvE content that demands survivability, and up to 59 for the usual safe balance of risk versus power. Anything above is only recommended if you're feeling adventurous and like to feel as if you're having 2 boss encounters happening at once. It's worth noting you can immune yourself from those corruption effects every 3 minutes for 6 seconds with the legendary Cloak on usability. Since BFA is all about creating systems to combat other created systems, we're not done yet, so let's get to that part. The legendary Cloak is an 8.3 edition, which is the reason behind the massive power difference between players. After unlocking it by doing an introductory quest line given by no other than Rathiam himself, this cloak is yet another progression system, at this point probably grindier than everything else mentioned so far. The way the progression works is as follows. First, you upgrade it up to level 15 by doing objectives in the Horrific Visions content, which increases its power by adding more sanity loss protection in said visions, as well as corruption resistance. Both of those are designed to make you stronger over time with each new cloak level, eventually allowing you to equip more corrupted items and clear horrific visions with very little sanity lost inside, making it much easier. Notable rank upgrades are at level 6, which adds the on-use effect that clears you of the negative corruption spawns from your gear for 6 seconds and a 3-minute cooldown, and at rank 12, which just adds a big main stat proc, which is quite legendary indeed. Following that, once your cloak is 15, you can keep upgrading it with items called Malefic Cores that increases your corruption resistance further by 3 per item, which you can get from your first weekly full clear vision or by defeating Azeroth on normal difficulty or higher. You can speed up the process by buying those Malefic Cores with the help of the corruption vendor currency at the suggested retail price of 2000 Echoes of Ny'alotha level 1, but remember that you need about 20 of them to max out the cloak resistance, so there's plenty for you to grind if you haven't given up by now just yet. There are a lot of currencies in BFA, and particularly 8.3, as they've piled up over the course of the expansion. This is a direct result of adding no less than 2 per patch, and I'll cover all of them in another video, but for now, here are the important ones. You get them from doing quests in the 2 assault zones, which are the 8.3 dailies. They serve no other purpose than to buy a key to enter a horrific vision at the cost of 10,000 for one entry. Both assaults and visions are your main objective of repeatable weekly content in the patch, but I won't go into details about them in this video as it already got depressingly long. Those are gained almost exclusively from said horrific visions. You can also get 800 of them in the Ny'alotha raid by killing 4 lieutenants per reset that give 200 each. They are used for upgrading your visions research table, which helps you by making you stronger in them. Eventually, they will also allow you to buy a backpack transmog, a mount that you need to farm for ages to get, and most importantly the ability to add sockets to your pieces of gear, leading to an unending hamster wheel of a gameplay making you chase better items and upgrades with each passing week. As after 5 months of vigorous gameplay, I'm still missing some sockets in my best in slot items. I would just recommend going for the mount and transmog at that point in the expansion. Seals of Water and Fate are this expansion's bonus roll system, which you can acquire from an NPC located in the transmog group. You can get 2 per weekly reset and buy them with war resources, gold or mark of honors that you get from various PvP activities. Titan Residuum is what you get when you scrap Azerite Armor at the scrapper. An engine that was supposed to have a better purpose for crafting professions, but after 2 years, still works as if the game was in an alpha state. This currency allows you to buy a specific Azerite piece of your choice from a vendor, or just rolling for a random one and getting the same one 3 times in a row, making you question your very existence. War resources is something you gain from most daily content, which are mainly world quests and emissaries, and apparently serve a purpose, but honestly I forgot what kind. Echoes of Ny'alotha are probably the most important of them all. You gain them from doing almost any kind of endgame content and are not time-gated. You are finally able to play whatever type of endgame content you like and get an actual powerful currency doing so, as it allows you to basically buy everything that is behind the player power grind loop of the expansion, from additional vision keys to the corruptions you want, or even Malefic Cores, the so-called legendary cloak upgrades. You can also get rank 3 essences for your alts, and sadly, only your alts, as in order to buy the ones you want, you need to have them unlocked on another character first. This should cover the most important bits of BFA system as a whole, and surely made for a longer video than I anticipated, making me realize how much has been added to the expansion over those 2 years. Looking back now, I'd like to disagree with the opinion that BFA was even worse than Worlds of Draenor. Contrary to that expansion, you actually had a lot of stuff to do in the game. The problem is, however, that was the first time the game felt like it was actively punishing you for playing it, making you do chores gameplay over and over and over again, while everything you were achieving was either relief at best or frustration for the most part. And it's coming from a guy that really loves the game and always did, like most of us WoW players. From getting the same traits to farming the same items from patch to patch, but with a higher number slapped on top of it, it left me felt drained quite a few times. Oh yeah, not to mention some sort of mobile games pay to win elements made it into the game when buying high item level BOE corrupted items were a thing. Having said that, Shadowlands is looking quite decent for now, but with some questionable decisions here and there, but overall there's a lot to look forward to, so most of us remain hopeful, as I'll cover the alpha or soon to be beta in the near future. If you've managed to stay till now, thank you for watching. Feel free to leave me a sub if you enjoyed it, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.